Needless to say, what's going to be happening in Iowa on the 8th of February is going to be very, very important. You're the beginning. You're the folks that are going to start this long and interesting presidential derby. And I would be less than candid if I didn't say to you that I would like to have the support of every single one of you in this room, and I hope I will, and I hope you'll be at those caucuses. The eyes of the nation are going to be on Iowa, I can assure you. And Iowa is going to play a very, very important role. As a matter of fact, it's conceivable that Iowa could literally nominate the next president of the United States on the 8th of February. A little more than a year from today, America will have a new president. The Reagan era will be over. Well, it's interesting. When I first wrote that, I didn't really write it as an applause line, and it gets great applause everywhere I go. The Reagan era will be over, but its legacy will still be with us. Now, some will claim that these years have radically revised our expectations of government and permanently changed the way we think of ourselves and of our country. I don't share that view. I think these years have really been a time of transition, a pause that shook things up, but a prelude to an era of renewed energy and activism in this country. Americans are ready for a change. We're ready for a president who will challenge us again, a president who will stand up for what is right, a president who will revive our nation's strength and purpose, a president who will face the future and renew the promise of America, the promise of genuine opportunity for every single citizen in this country of ours. Above all, we're ready for a president who understands that shares in the American dream aren't something that can be bought or sold on Wall Street. They are the birthright of all Americans, no matter who they are or where they come from or what the color of their skin. So when we read, as we did recently, about a homeless veteran named Charles Farr, who went to the VA for help and was told that until he had an address and a telephone and a car, we couldn't help him find a job, America loses. When we read about families sleeping in cars because they can't afford a decent apartment, I mean working families. Working families in Columbus Junction, working for IBP, who can't afford an apartment and are living in their cars, every American loses. And when we read that hundreds of thousands of Americans are falling into what the sociologists call the permanent underclass, we understand why this presidential election is so important. Not just for those living in poverty, but for every American in this country. As president, I want to renew this nation's commitment to full employment, and I mean full employment. Madge said that we had decimated the unemployment rate. Not quite, but in my state it is now 2.9%. 2.9%. We have more jobs than people to fill them. We've got employers competing for employees. That's what you mean by full employment. Matter of fact, I thought we had hit rock bottom, and then Madge, the Prime Minister of Sweden, visited me several weeks ago, and he told me that it was 1.7 in Sweden. So I got my cabinet together, and I said, folks, we've got to go to work and get down to 1.7. I mean, we can't let Sweden beat us. But I'm talking about full employment, a nation in which we have the full use of the energies and skills of every single one of our citizens. And one of the most important challenges our nation will face in the future is how do we help single-parent families, Diana, Victoria, single parents like you, and families where both parents work, to balance the demands of employment with the responsibilities of caring for their children. In America today, 3 out of every 5 women with school-age children have a job outside their home. 3 out of every 5. Between now and the year 2000, 75% of the new entrants into the workforce in this country will either be women and or minority citizens. That means that the next president of the United States must understand the importance of quality child care for working women. He must understand the importance of working women to the economic future of our country. And he must understand the importance to our country of keeping alive the family and community values that sustain our spirit and define our purpose as a people. Now, this past week, as all of us know, the nation was treated to the spectacle of the Republican vice president and the Senate minority leader throwing mud pies at each other like a couple of boys in the backyard. I suggest that they end this juvenile bickering and join the Democrats in this country in trying to understand the changes that are taking place in the American workplace and the fact that families are being forced too often to choose between the jobs they need and the children they love. I'm very proud of the fact that Time magazine called the Governor's Daycare Partnership in my state the most comprehensive state-supported daycare system in America. And as president, I want to lead a national daycare partnership that will involve everyone who cares about our future and who understands the importance of quality daycare and quality child care. Now, I'm not talking about a big new spending program. I'm talking about leadership that will make quality, affordable daycare available to every American family that needs it by the end of the century. I'm talking about a president who wants to create a bright economic future for our nation and about the ideals and values that have made America great and that will keep us strong. The business community must be involved in this partnership. So must organized labor. So must state and local governments. Today, only about 150 major corporations in this country operate daycare centers in their plants and offices. The fact is that daycare is not just good social policy, it's good business as well. Not too long ago, I met a hosiery manufacturer from North Carolina, who, by the way, had the good sense to send 3 of his kids to Swarthmore College, which happens to be my alma mater, just outside of Philadelphia. I knew there was a special something about this guy, and they sent 3 of his kids to Swarthmore. Anyway, he's a hosiery manufacturer in North Carolina, and he told me that in the hosiery industry in North Carolina, the turnover in employees is 100% a year. I mean, if you've got 100 employees working for you, you've got to hire 200 people every year to keep 100 employees working. Not the greatest work in the world. Well, he took a look at this situation, obviously very wasteful, very inefficient, and he decided that he would open a daycare center in his plant. Charges his employees $25 a week for each of their children, and he subsidizes the rest. You know what's happened to his turnover? Down to 4%. 4% from 100%. So for this businessman, he's not only doing the right thing, he's making money at the same time. This is good business practice as well. Why? Because he's virtually eliminated his turnover. He's got the same employees, well-trained, well-motivated, feeling good about themselves and about the company they work for, and able to bring their children to the plant, to that daycare center, and take them home at night. In my own state, in Lawrence, Massachusetts, an old textile community, Greco Brothers makes some of the finest men's clothing in this country. If you've ever seen a Southwick suit, it is made in Lawrence, Massachusetts. That company has 700 employees, most of them women, from at least a dozen different ethnic backgrounds. Today, Greco Brothers has a first-class daycare center in that plant run by a fine nonprofit organization, financed partly by the company, partly by state government, and partly by a 1 cent an hour assessment on every paycheck that the members of the union voluntarily voted to assess on themselves. A wonderful partnership. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about a daycare partnership. Management, union, and government working together to create that daycare center where these mothers and some fathers can bring their children, have lunch with them during their lunch break, pick them up at the end of the day. That's a daycare partnership at its best. You know and I know that trying to work at a job without good daycare is virtually impossible. That's why we need a new approach to daycare and child care in this country, and that's why we need a new approach to welfare as well. The federal government still thinks about welfare the way it did 50 years ago, and it's no wonder, because the program we have today in this country, the welfare program we have today, was designed to help widows and orphans during the Great Depression. Times have changed. The overwhelming majority of people on welfare in this country today are single mothers with young children. Very few men on welfare. The overwhelming majority of families, well over 90% of the families on AFTC in this country, are single mothers with young children. They're women like Don Lawson, a friend and a constituent of mine in Massachusetts, a young mother from Worcester, Massachusetts, who was on welfare for 7 years. The Don Lawsons of this country don't want welfare. They want dignity and they want work. They want to be independent. But unless we want or expect those women to abandon their children for make-work jobs, we've got to say more to them than just go get a job. States all over the country are now saying to women like Don Lawson, we're serious, And we're prepared to provide daycare for your children and real training for real jobs that you can create a bright future for yourselves and for your children. And it works. It works. It's working for Don Lawson, who today earns $19,000 a year as a personnel specialist at one of this nation's major corporations. And by the way, she's recently just started her own business. This was a woman who was on welfare for 7 years. I remember meeting her and her son for the first time when I was with a group of mothers that had gone through this program, and I went over to her son, who now is, I guess, about 10. He was about 7 then, and I said to him, is there anything different about your life since your mother graduated from what we call our ET program, our Employment and Training Choices program? He said, yeah, she smiles a lot now. I will never forget that. And that young man was with his mother and with me as she testified in front of a congressional committee about the importance of employment and training for her and for literally millions of mothers on welfare like her. And it was this young man who, his mother had been on welfare a few years before, walking around that congressional hearing room taking pictures of congressmen and governors and lots of other people. I'll tell you, it was quite a moment. This program of training for real jobs at good wages, of child care, and of extended health benefits has helped over 40,000, mostly women and some men in my own state, to find full or part-time jobs. And these are real jobs, not make work. The overwhelming majority of them in the private sector paying twice the minimum wage to start. Twice the minimum wage to start. Our ET graduates begin at about $13,000 a year coming off of those training programs. It's working for more than 8,000 employers who have hired graduates of our ET program. And ET is working for our taxpayers as well. It has generated over $100 million in federal and state welfare savings and in new revenues from the taxes paid by the ET graduates. And that's net after the cost of the program. Here's a way to bring down the federal deficit, to help hundreds of thousands of welfare families become independent and self-sufficient and lift themselves out of poverty. But the reason ET and other programs like it across the country are working is because its message is one of hope, of optimism. A message that says we're not here to blame you, we're here to help you. To turn dependence into independence and despair into opportunity. It's time that that message of hope and dignity went out to every family in this nation that is on public assistance. You know, Kitty and I have 2 daughters that we love very much. One of them is, as a matter of fact, working full-time in my Des Moines headquarters. The other happens to be a freshman in college in New England and spends half of her time studying, half of her time recruiting her fellow students to go out and canvass for me in New Hampshire. And we want for them the same opportunity, the same rights we want for our son. The same opportunity that all Americans deserve. The opportunity not just for a job, any job, but for a good job, with a good future at good wages. It is simply not acceptable in the United States of America in the year of our Lord, 1988, that women are paid 20% less than men working in equivalent jobs, that women on the whole earn just 64 cents for every dollar earned by men, or that women from minority groups earn on the average even less. There is no for men only sign on the door of opportunity in this country. There is no room for sexism in the future we want to build in America. You know, for the past 7 years, we've been told not to worry about those of our neighbors who are out of luck, that those who can't make it in America are just getting what they deserve. That's not the kind of America I've seen during the past 9 months here in Iowa. Every city and town and farm family that I've visited, every voter I've talked to and listened to, has reinforced for me a very basic and simple message. That there is something far more basic than personal self-interest that lies at the heart of our democratic system. That there is something very powerful and very special that sustains this nation and keeps us strong. And that something comes not from our material possessions, but from our principles, from the values that our people bring to the everyday challenges of life, from our basic decency, from our willingness to look beyond the borders of our individual lives to care about and give something back to the communities of which we are a part. My parents came to this country 75 years ago seeking the promise of America, seeking the American dream. And that dream came true for them as it has for Kitty and me and for our children. Unfortunately today, for the worker in Waterloo who has been laid off and offered a $4.50 an hour job in place of the $12 or $13 an hour he used to make, The American dream is not real. For a young farm family paying 14% interest on its loans and threatened with farm foreclosure, the American dream is not real. For elderly citizens who are worried that they may be bankrupted because they can't pay their medical bills, the American dream is not real. And for those among us who are homeless, 2 million of our fellow citizens, families who can't afford a decent apartment or a decent home, the American dream is a cruel joke. Not long ago, my wife Kitty was campaigning in Ida Grove. And just as she was about to leave, a woman who had been sitting quietly throughout the meeting raised her hand and started to talk about losing the farm that had been in her family for 4 generations, about losing the companionship of her husband, who had been forced to move to North Dakota to find work and was only able to make it back 1 weekend in 4, about losing her pride, for she had no dental insurance and was ashamed to go out even among her neighbors because she had lost most of her teeth. That woman from Ida Grove deserves better from America. We must and we will build a kind of economic future and the kind of society that will reach out and provide genuine economic opportunity for every citizen in every region in this land. But whether we succeed at that, and that, in my judgment, is the single most important task facing the next president of the United States, whether we succeed at that isn't going to be determined by the next president alone. Because no president can create opportunity without the full backing and support and participation of the American people. And that's why, as president, I'm going to be asking for your help. I'll be asking our best students to become the teachers we'll need if our next generation is to have the skills and the education and the inspiration they need to enter the 21st century. I'll be asking office workers and retired teachers to volunteer their time to share with a neighbor the precious gift of literacy. I'll be asking businesses to be wise enough and innovative enough to retrain their workers and retool their factories and help to rebuild their communities. I'll be asking bricklayers and carpenters to work with all of us to create decent and affordable housing for all Americans. I want to ask young scientists to dedicate their great gifts not to the destruction of life, but to its preservation, to the battle against AIDS and toxic waste and world hunger. I'll be asking every citizen in this country, young or old, rich or poor, black or white, to give something back to their communities and to their country. The next president isn't going to be asking for help just from members of Congress and from governors and state legislators and local officials. He's going to be asking for your help because it's going to take all of us to deliver on the promise of America. My friends, this presidential race must not be about succumbing to shrunken ambitions. It must be about building the future we want and conquering the next American frontier. Because when this race is over, we must have a president who will bring our people together, a president who understands leadership and the meaning of an active and involved and caring government, a president who can help our citizens define their hopes and aspirations for the 21st century, a president who believes in the American dream. I'm a product of that dream. And I want to help make it come true for every single citizen in this country. That's the kind of president America needs, and with your help, that's the kind of president I intend to be. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Yeah.
You don't get many people who watch kids at night. You know, I go to school full-time during the day and at night. Yeah. I mean, I have a really super babysitter, a good friend of mine, and I'm lucky, but there's a lot of women that, you know, are staying on welfare because they can't, you know, find anybody who's going to cut the cost of babysitting for them.
Well, I think this, if people are on public assistance and we expect to help them get off, then good child care has to be a part of it.
You know, right now I'm not, you know, I'm not insured medically because I make too much money to get a Title 19 card for me or my son. And
well, what I would like to do, and the legislation that's just passed the House of Representatives and now in the Senate, proposed, by the way, by the 50 governors, all of us, Republicans as well as Democrats, would provide federal support for state programs for real training for welfare mothers, daycare for those children, for up to a year after you get a job. So at least you have an opportunity to get settled, to get that job, maybe begin to move up and complete your education, and for extended health benefits for up to a year after you get that job as well. Now, one of these days, I hope we're going to have a system in this country where employers are expected to provide health insurance as a matter of course. That would take care of the problem. And I'm currently rather actively involved in attempting to get that legislation through my own legislature. If we do, we'll be the first legislature in America ever to do it. It's not the most uncontroversial bill I've ever filed with my legislature, as you can imagine, but I'd say we're about 60% of the way home. It's already through one branch of my legislature, and we're now working on the other. But I think the time has come, folks, when the United States joins all of the other industrial nations in the world with the exception of South Africa. You know, we're one of only 2 industrial nations in the world, ourselves and South Africa, that don't provide some kind of basic health security for our citizens. Only 2 of them. And if we could do those things, then it would make it a lot easier for you to become independent, to become self-sufficient, to have the assurance of knowing that if something happens to your child or children, that those medical bills are going to be paid and that you're going to get some decent child care. Yeah.
I'd be interested in knowing why it is that you don't accept PAC money to help towards your campaign funding?
Because I think it's a lousy system, if I may say. Not the most elegant. I don't like it. I don't like the influence of PACs, the growing influence of PACs on American politics these days. You know, where's the PAC for the homeless people in this country? Where's the PAC for welfare mothers trying to get off of welfare? Where's the PAC for mothers that are struggling to get some daycare? You have a right at least to be on some kind of equal footing with the folks that have the money and create PAC. And if there's one thing this campaign of mine has proven, I hope it is that you don't need a PAC or PACs to finance a campaign. We've raised something like 3 times what any other candidate on the Democratic side has raised, and there isn't a dime of PAC money in the entire amount, and we have some 53,000 individual contributors. And frankly, I think I've got a better campaign as a result of it. And one of the reasons I was a little surprised at this good woman, who seemed like a very, very decent person, who's supporting Senator Dole, is because Senator Dole and the Republican minority in the Senate have been filibustering legislation to drastically reduce the impact of PACs, and they've filibustered it to death. And as you know, in the Senate, a minority can stop a bill by just talking and talking and talking. And if Senator Dole comes to this campus, one of you might ask him just why he's doing that. Now, I think we all know, but the fact of the matter is that these organizations are not a good influence in American politics, and I can tell you this: Mike Dukakis is elected President of the United States. The first piece of legislation I'm going to send up to Capitol Hill will be a bill that drastically reduces the influence of political action committees in the politics of this country. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
In this state, who point to the Soviet Union as proof that corporate agriculture doesn't work. How do you feel about that?
I agree. One of the reasons why I'm so strongly supportive of the family farm. I think it is an important agricultural institution. I think it's an important social institution. And I want to help shape a farm policy in which it is small and medium-sized family farmers that get the kind of support they need. I don't know why you and I and the American people are paying $1 million to the Prince of Liechtenstein and his co-investors under the farm program. I don't know why 40 guys from El Paso who bought 40,000 acres in Montana, which they seed from the air and don't even step foot on, are now trying to get $50,000 apiece under the farm program. That's not my view of a farm program designed to support small and medium-sized family farmers. So I'm for reforming that farm credit system and providing some protections against unnecessary and unwarranted foreclosure. That, I think, has finally happened under the new farm credit bill. I'm for limiting those payments to genuine, active family farms and family farmers, which, by the way, would save us some money as well and cut the federal deficit. And I'm for getting very serious about developing new commercial uses for agricultural products that can open up new markets and new opportunities for our family farmers in this country. There are all kinds of opportunities out there for ethanol and biodegradable plastics. Road de-icers in my state. We're on a major highway. We're not using road salt this winter. We're using an ethanol derivative that you can make from corn. And it doesn't destroy bridges, and it doesn't rip up the underside of cars, and it doesn't pollute groundwater. Made from corn. It's called CMA. I mean, these are some of the things that we ought to be doing if we start putting some of our research money into those new kinds of products. But I'm very, very concerned about corporations and conglomerates taking over the agriculture of this country. I can't think of anything worse. And I'm for policies that support and strengthen the family farm. I feel very strongly about that. Yeah.
Due to the great duress that the Reagan administration has put on the Federal Reserve System, do you plan to regulate both domestic and international banking industries with U.S. interests?
Well, it's the president who appoints the members of the Federal Reserve Board. So if you elect a president who wants to have a good, strong, growing economy and a responsible banking system, I would hope and expect that he would pick people to serve on the Federal Reserve Board that share that philosophy. Now, I don't have to tell any of you in this room that my own view of economic leadership and the presidency is light years apart from the current administrations. I'm a guy who believes in an active, strong, vigorous presidency. I've said, and I will repeat it, that the first regional economic development conference we're going to have, if I'm president of the United States, is going to be at the Adler Theater in Davenport, Iowa. And I mean it. And we're going to bring in leaders and citizens and farmers and workers and business people, and representatives of organized labor and educators and good citizens from Iowa and Illinois and Minnesota and South Dakota and Missouri, Nebraska. We're going to go to work and begin to rebuild the economy of the heartland of this country, right here with you. And that's going to require enlightened banking. It's going to require reasonably priced credit. How do you farm with loans with 14% interest? Can you kindly tell me? How do you survive with 14% interest? Any of you know what the prime interest rate is in Japan? Anybody want to guess? Anyone want to guess? Take a guess. Less than 3%. Less than 3%. Here it's 8.5%. Historically, interest in this country has always been about 2 points above the rate of inflation. We've got to have about a 5% prime interest rate. Farmers paying 12, 13, 14% interest. So that's the kind of economic policy I'm for. Yes, ma'am.
Do you about Nicaragua?
How much time do you have?
Funded your country?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the Central American presidents are meeting today. I wish I could tell you that thanks to President Arias' leadership in the Arias Plan, we're now moving toward peace, and I can't tell you that. And I regret to say to you that it is now clear that the Reagan administration is doing everything it can to destroy the Arias Plan. Everything it can to destroy the Arias Plan. Our policy in Central America is a failed and illegal policy. Make no mistake about it. The Contras are nothing more than a wholly owned subsidiary of the CIA. That's all they are. Wouldn't survive for a week and a half without U.S. support. And here's this fine young president from Costa Rica who, by dint of his own leadership, has now come up with a plan which, if it was supported by the United States, would have moved us rapidly toward an end of that war and toward the social and economic reconstruction of Central America. You know, Oscar Arias was in Boston a few months ago, and we had breakfast together, and I said to him, Mr. President, what do you think would happen if the United States enthusiastically supported your plan? And he looked at me and said, we'd succeed. What happened last week? The President's National Security Advisor and the Assistant Secretary for Inter-American Affairs went to every one of the 4 Central American countries, except Nicaragua, and in effect threatened them with a loss of U.S. aid if they didn't do what we told them to do. Now, I hold no brief for the Sandinistas. They are not Democrats, small d or large d. But the best hope for an end to the killing and for peace in Central America is the Arias Plan, and the United States should be behind that plan. Folks, they talk about pressuring the Sandinistas. You heard that? You know, got to keep pressure on the Sandinistas. You know what pressure means? It means kids with their arms blown off. That's what it means. It means pregnant women killed in Contra raids. That's what it means. We have an opportunity for peace, for democracy, and human rights in Central America. We're not only blowing it, we're doing everything we can to destroy it. Needless to say, that policy will change abruptly. The guy you're looking at is President of the United States on January 20th. Yeah.
We've seen in the past 2 Republican presidents catchy little phrases like Gerald Ford's whip inflation now, Reagan administration, the trickle-down economics.
Supply-side economics.
Supply-side economics and trickle-down.
Have you noticed that the Vice President of the United States is the only guy that can't quote himself? That's something Jesse Jackson loves to say, you know? Jesse Jackson loves to say, you know, he talked about voodoo economics in 1980. He's the only guy that can't quote himself. But he was right. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Catchy phrase, how would you characterize the Dukakis economic policy?
Without a catchy phrase. Well, I don't know how catchy this is, but I use it a number of times in my prepared remarks. I'm for making the American dream come true for every single citizen in this country. And what do we mean by that? How do you define the American dream? A good job at good wages, decent schools for our kids, decent and affordable housing, decent and affordable health care, quality environment. That's not asking a great deal, is it? That's what the American dream is all about. How do we get it? By taking public resources, combining those public resources with private initiative, working together, bringing people together, not dividing people, not polarizing people. I think we ought to create a national economic development fund of $500 million, 1/7 of the cost of Star Wars, by the way. 1/7 of the cost of Star Wars that we don't need and we can't afford. And put those monies into grants and loans to economy building, job creating projects, public-private partnership, expanding businesses that are willing to create good jobs at good wages, and I mean good wages, not $3.35 an hour. You can't support a family on $3.35 an hour. But it's an activist, leading, energetic kind of economic leadership that brings people together around economic growth and the creation of good jobs, that invests in training and technology and all of the things that we know are so important, and makes a special effort to help rebuild the economy of the heartland of this country, of the energy states of those parts of the country that have been hurting and struggling. You know, we're one nation, folks. We're not two nations or three nations or four nations. When we were hurting in the mid-'70s, and believe me, my state was hurting, second highest unemployment rate in the country, biggest state deficit in the country. They were calling us the new Appalachia. You helped us. You may not know that, but you were helping us. Now it's our turn to help you. That's what this country is all about. One last question, and then we're going to wrap up. Yes?
What the problem that's going to be facing me caucus night is how do you plan to defeat the Republican nominee?
If you support Mike Dukakis on caucus night, all of your problems will disappear. You will have no problem. It's a fair question. I hope I can lift this burden from your shoulders and send you out of here with a Dukakis button. Well, look, all of us that are in this race, I'm sure, will tell you that we're the candidate. Let me just tell you why I think I can beat the Republicans and why I can bring the strongest candidacy at that final election. First, I'm a guy that has a track record on economic growth and the creation of jobs. This isn't just talk. I've done it. And I think that's going to be very important as we face the Republicans. To have a candidate who has a track record and credibility when it comes to creating good jobs, to building economic strength, improving our schools, to expanding daycare, to doing all of the things that we must do. And that's something that I bring to this campaign now in my 10th year as a chief executive. Secondly, I'm somebody who knows how to balance budgets. I've balanced 9 in a row, and I'm in the process of balancing a 10th. And if we are vulnerable as a party, it is with this tax and spend label. Now, as I said at the NBC debate, I would love to get one of these Republicans up on the stage in the debate and talk about what it's like to borrow and spend and live on a credit card for 7 years, because that's what we face. But I think I'm one of the few Democratic candidates that can get up on that stage and take that issue to the Republicans instead of being defensive about it. And I think that's important. Finally, we're running a 50-state campaign. This is not a regional campaign that's limited to this state or this region or some other region. This is going to be a 50-state campaign. We're going to have delegate slates in every one of the 50 states. We have active political committees now in virtually every state in the country. And a very, very strong organization, good financial resources, none of them, to repeat, from political action committees. So I think all of those things should give you the confidence, I hope it will, that this can be a winning campaign, not just in the primary, but in the final election as well. Let me just wrap up by repeating something I said a little earlier. I am not kidding you when I say to all of you that you have it within your power not only to make an important statement on the 8th of February, but conceivably to nominate the next President of the United States. If I can do well in Iowa and win in New Hampshire, we're going to be on our way. And if you all can see your way clear to make that happen, I will be eternally grateful. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Appreciate it. It's great to help. Thanks very much.